and regulations are things that bind us as designers and architects for us to look at how important health and safety is. It is very clear in the new Ghana Building Code. There's also a draft policy on occupational health and safety for Ghana, and it has been in draft stage since 2012. Nobody knows why it hasn't been passed as a law. So we are looking at that as being a basis for health and safety and environment in the country, where every company, every organization would comply. Yes, it's common law, it's statute law, and all that legal stuff. It is your duty to provide safe environment if it's a construction site. You also need to provide the safer plant, whether you hire or you own. And the systems and the working arrangements in terms of training, inspections, how working patterns and all that has to be thought through, because it is your duty. This is the economic cost impact that we have. If there is an accident, so if we take one particular accident, the cost that we can all see, and this figure on my left is the iceberg, and we all know about how the iceberg is formed under the sea. We only see about possibly the injury and the health cost on how the business is losing. But if we go down the ladder and we see how much cost, it is between 4 to 12 times of the figure that we see, because even reputational damage of a construction company cannot be repaired. It will take you years of you building your reputation, and just a simple accident would then bring you down. So all these are part of them. In terms of the social cost, of course, nobody wants to work with a company that they will go and they will get injured. People will not feel happy, the morale will go down, and then you get people not participating or coming to your site regularly because they don't feel safe. As I mentioned, the corporate image, loss of reputation. And just look at this from the business point of view. It says that to promote effective incentives to improve health and safety within the organization, the cost of injury and injury should be made economical, internal, viable, and routinely visible. What we are all saying is that if we put in to our management, or if we look at the cost of injury as a basis for us doing health and safety, it will help us to be able to put this across if we are not senior managers or we are not guys who make decisions. And incidents that happen in Malcolm, Newmont, Gall, and all these incidents had a lot of cost. And there was an incident in Anglo Gold where somebody died because they didn't put in place the good systems, and the court awarded 9 million Ghana cedis. That's a lot of money if you even put it in the dollar terms. And this took about 5 years to happen. Even though it was long and somebody died, and we don't want nobody getting killed on our site, how many companies will survive if they are supposed to pay this amount of money? And so it's something that we have to look at. If it gets to a time where a lawyer can pursue you because somebody has died on your site, or somebody has died as a result of your design, then this is something that we have to look at. It's also a business case that we need to look at, because it is not only us trying to chase money or trying to maximize profit, but the importance is that we need to be able to avoid losses. And if you avoid losses, it means that you are not taking money away and you can still make your money. What is the goal of designing for health and safety and environment? The goal is that as a contractor, business owner, firm, engineer, or an architect, how do you make sure that from day one, as you start thinking about your design, it is going to be a life cycle and sustainable objective, such that the emphasis is that your permanent design feature should eliminate or reduce hazards. And the hazards is pre-construction stage, construction stage, after construction, when people are occupying your building, and as far as demolition. So we are looking at a process whereby you are going to try to eliminate, let's say, falls. And we'll go through the process where we know that falling from height and falls on a construction site is one of the biggest, or is the majority of accidents that happens on site. So how do you make sure that the features that you put on your building or your design would stop somebody falling during construction, will stop somebody falling at the maintenance and repair stages, as well as will stop somebody falling when we need to demolish that property, maybe 20, 40, 100 years down the line when you are not even alive. But designing for construction safety is not how to show somebody wearing a protective gear or PPE or whatever it is. And so let's understand the various elements. And these are the stats. These statistics are foreign-based and all that, because that's one of the things that we are struggling with safety in Ghana. The statistics are not there. Some of us are trying to build it up within our space and our sector and our professional organization. But for now, some of these statistics are not different, because fatalities within the construction site and within the environment, falls are always the ones that kill a lot of people. So during the foundation stage, structure, exterior, and then going through the various aspects of construction, these are some of the figures that you have. So for a conventional construction, design professional prepare the plans and specifications show that the building complies with the building code. So we have a code and then we design such that we will be in compliance with what the law says that we should do. Hazards are managed during the construction process. Little thought goes through the process after the owner takes possession. So when we design and we build and we hand over to the end user or the estate owner, the facilities managers, the company that's paying for your designs and your construction, little thought goes through what happens afterwards. And I'm saying this with respect, such that every single hazard that happens after your designs has been built can't be stopped or can't be avoided if you think about it. So for typical construction arrangement, the owner will contract various contractors. The entities would then either subcontract or they will give some of the work to various specialities. And then the project owners would contract some of the design firm to do both design or construction sometimes. The project will move fast and then safety responsibilities are often blurred or neglected. That is the situation that we have here. And so for a designer or for an architect, if you have already thought through safety in your designs, that means that every single specification from procurement to all the various aspects of your design would then put responsibilities to specific people when we are on site. The process is addressing site health and safety and planning for future maintenance in the design phase of the project. So let's look at some of these stats as well, knowing very well that injuries that occurred between this time in the States, some of the states in the US were linked to the design. And so in Europe and other countries where the data is very clear, we can see that your designs, the lines that you are marking, the point in spaces, and this brings me back to the architecture school. The point in spaces that we are trying to put across, those curves and those nice designs, we have to be responsible for that because our designs could have fatal implications. Some of the factors that contribute to accidents on construction sites are these, and we need to understand when we talk about training and methods and then unsafe conditions, because it is us. And if I say us, I'm talking about the design team, the architects, the people who lead projects. They have the bigger responsibilities to make sure that these factors are curtailed or these factors are eliminated very early in the stage. Where do we fit? Considering safety issues related to construction maintenance facilities, designing out anticipated hazards. And so you meet a client and you want to, the client is asking you for some of the things that sometimes is unbelievable. The way I see architecture and I see design, anything should be able to be built if we're able to put in the various technology together. But in that same vein, we need to look at how we can design out any hazard that can come from, again, pre-construction, construction, maintenance and repair, and demolition stage. And so your job is to design out any anticipated hazard. And you can only do that when you involve safety professionals or somebody within your team who can anticipate these hazards, review your drawings, and then you can design it out. So these are the phases that I want us to look at. So the pre-design stage, concept, design, development, construction and documentation, construction stage, and project review. If you break it down, you can see that you develop, you design, you construct or manufacture, you supply, you install, you commission, and you use it. After it's been handed over to the end user, your job doesn't end there if you have thought about it, because these buildings and facilities are going to be maintained. And some of the reasons why most of our buildings in this country is struggling for the look and feel, or how people see a building that is built very nicely and within 5 years, we can't even make it up, is because we did not think about the maintenance. And every time we keep saying maintenance culture, it starts with architects, it starts with designers. If you think about how this building is going to be maintained, your choice of materials would be thought through and it will be chosen. It will take some time, but every building at a certain point in time is going to be decommissioned, such that eventually we might have to demolish it because there is an activity, or because we want to change the area or whatever it is, or we have to do something to it. And so at that particular point, you have to think about the materials that you used maybe 150 years ago and its effects whenever there's going to be a demolition, because the particles are going to be generated and it might be harmful to people at that time. Then the disposal and recycling. This is where the environment comes in. If you are choosing materials that cannot be disposed of safely, it is not sensible, in my opinion, to be able to choose it if you are somebody thinking about sustainability and the well-being of people. So we've talked about this. We want to eliminate hazard. We want to design structures so that during the modification stage, we will look at how things could be done properly. Design output includes hard copy and electronic drawing, details and all that scope. And specifications are very important, because when you specify, they will build it. That's one thing that you guys have control. If you mark the line, if you specify, they will build it, as long as there is monitoring and oversight. What are the benefits of all that we are talking about? So, more effective prevention of injuries, improved usability of structures, because people will be able to adapt, improve productivity, reduce cost, better prediction and management of production, and then innovation. This gives us an opportunity to innovate and start thinking all these words that out of the box, because I think the very few times that I've presented this to a group of people, it gave them the opportunity to look at how they do their designs, because every single line, as I've said, would be reviewed and it will be checked for the safety and how you place your spaces. We've gone through this. Who is a designer? So I remember back in the days, we started off as BSc design, and then we ended with a BSc architecture. But the design profession is not only for architects or people who hold the pens and the pencils. We are looking at anybody whose decisions and ideas and activity affects what we build. So procurement entities, quantity surveyors, any single person who has an input in that process is a designer. And so we should be mindful of that. So if a client were to propose a specification for, say, an installation which involves installing a component that has a high risk, that was reasonably practical to adopt. If so, this is a scenario whereby your client is asking you to do something whereby you know very well that it is risky, the hazards are high, it will not be good for the environment in the long run and all that stuff. It is your duty, and I'm saying this again, it is your duty, your integrity, your values, your ethics, to be able to not just chase the money, but to be able to advise and encourage this client. And every single time I speak to my colleagues and my friends architects, this is something that we are battling with. How do we encourage and compel our clients, not looking at whether the client will go away, if we can design to solve the real problems in our society? And if we as architects and we as an association can look at that as an area where we have a challenge, then our industry will be good. People will then start trusting architects again and seeing that our job is very, very important. And so it's our duty to tell the truth and to be able to encourage our clients, some of them very difficult because they hold the money, but to be able to let them know that this is what has to be done. This is the right way. And if you don't want me to do that, I'm not part of your design team. Can we do that? That's the question that we need to ask ourselves individually. So we are all thinking about the life cycle, and I've keep saying from planning, construction, and maintenance, it's a life cycle of your design that is very important, because in the end, even if something happens in every single, I mean, look across. So I'm in Kumasi, and if you guys have been in Kumasi, or those guys in the Kumasi, come and see how Kumasi is, the type of building that's going on. Without people knowing whether architects were involved or not, they are blaming architects. And I can't shy away from it, or I cannot say it's not, they can't blame architects, because from the legal point of view, or from the standards, or from whatever the Metropolitan Assembly has made us aware, that before a building can be approved, there is always a stamp by an architect on it. And so, unless I am wrong, if that is the case, then with my opinion, it means that every single building in this country that has a permit has been approved by an architect. And so we cannot take ourselves out of the system. But that is also another challenge and another issue that the Ghana Institute of Architects has to pick up within their long-term goals. So at the pre-design stage, we are looking at consultations and research, identifying the purpose of the structure, the risk, how the design and its discipline, the competencies and the people who have to be involved in that design, the roles and responsibilities, and then how do we establish relationship with clients and others who influence the stage. So before even you start thinking about what you want to put on the paper, you need to be able to consult people whose designs will be affected. And I know that this gets done, but in this case, we are talking about how do you bring people who can possibly understand safety and an environment within your design team so that we'll be able to design for safety. So we are thinking about the design and its intended process, the materials to be used, methods of construction, maintenance, operation. So imagine, even before you design, you have to think about how your design will be maintained and demolished and disposed of. And that is where I keep saying, I'm stressing, because that is all this is about. There are so many accidents and incidents happen on buildings and facilities because we did not think about how this is going to be maintained or how it is going to be disposed of if we break it down. So we are talking about establishing the context, identifying the rules, and then conducting consultation and research so we can identify these hazards and assess the controls. In terms of the consultations, we need to hold various activities that could then help us to be able to identify. When we are researching, there are laws, industry statistics, hazard information, and research. And there's so much, I mean, with the likes of the internet and journals are on the end across the various platforms, we cannot afford not to be well informed about this subject because it is being practiced in jurisdictions where we admire. And so if we are here and we are looking at setting ourselves apart from other professionals, these are some of the areas that we look at. Let's look at something called the ability to influence. So from this whole concept, designers and architects and people who make decisions has the ability to influence at the conceptual stage. So if you look at the graph, you can see that even before you start thinking about drawing or start thinking about how much you're going to charge this person, you have a lot of influence, and then at that time, the cost is very low. So if you look at the blue line, that's how much it's going to cost you at any point in the graph if you are going to put health and safety in place. And the time that you have the ability to influence keep decreasing when the costs start going high. And so when it gets to the demolition stage, where you want to demolish this property, which has been built over the years, at that time, if you are going to involve experts to be able to think about health and safety, your cost is going to go sky the roof because you've lost the ability to influence. And so I keep saying, you guys have the strength, you guys have the power, you guys have every single ability to be able to influence safety in the design. So these are also some of the things that we are looking at, and the examples are that you are going to check the site. And this is also something that I want to mention. Supposing a client comes to you, he or she has bought a site, and you know very well that this site is not good. What are you going to do? We've seen people building in various sites and various areas whereby eventually we keep saying it is flood prone and all that stuff. But these are designers and architects who are helping them build. We may say that sometimes they pick their designs and they just go and get their buildings and then they do it. But it is our responsibility to be involved in the process. How are we going to make sure that the dynamics of the family that we are providing for is being thought through? Because we don't know, people are going to get older, transition is going to come in place. If you put up a building whereby there are only stairways and there's no time for adaptability when they get older, how do you make sure that these people, old age, they don't need to climb these stairways and they can still make use of their property? These are some of the things that we have to look at. If you are designing for a workplace, you need to understand the demographics and how your building can influence how people work. Procurement entities, the choice of materials, how do we select our consultants and contractors? How do we ensure that health and safety design and expectations are being met? The materials that we choose, the suppliers that we choose. Are we only going for the aspect of it being cheap or it being available, or we are going to think outside the box whereby our procurement and how we buy products and equipment can help us to achieve this? We have to go through this risk analysis as well. And in that analysis, this is where we can identify certain aspects of what we are talking about. And it involves holding a lot of workshops and programs, on-site assessment, research, workshops. And if we're able to use the building information modeling, which is also being popular within these few years across the globe, it will make life easier, because supposing a design person or a safety person is within your project, every single action that you take, they will see it live, they will advise, and then we can take it off as the project goes on. And so that's also an area that we have to look at. These are some of the significant hazards that comes up within our construction and before or after we've put up our building. So it runs through from hazardous substances, manual handling, working over near water, temporary workers, confined spaces, and all that. If we can identify every single one of these across our designs by reviewing them, I am very sure our designs will come out and our structures will come out with less effect or less impact to the environment and to the health and safety of our people. Of course, design activities include setting up sites, and every single activity that's on this list would come up with a specific hazard, and these hazards would have to be risk assessed and then measures put in place such that we do not get accident and incident. I keep mentioning accident and incident because that is the resulting effect. And if you can identify the root cause at the early stages, it means that we wouldn't get there. Let's look at some of the examples that we would be able to incorporate if we start thinking about this practically. So we will look at roof anchorages, safe working spaces, openings, and all that stuff if we want to be able to incorporate this. And I'll go through, there are pictures which I'll show, which will list all these things. So the first step is we need to identify the potential hazards, consider all the various human factors, sequencing of works, distraction, lack of training during your construction, and do a what if analysis. What if analysis will come up, failure to comply, these utility failure, whether, and these analysis will also let us know if you are designing, let's say if we look at highway construction, we think about what if workers have to access the drains? How do we design that out? Are drains a possible confined space? If it's a possible confined space, how do you design it out? What about the power lines? What about worker and public injury from traffic accidents? How do you organize your work and site such that you can design it out? Do trucks have enough turning space? because sometimes we force ourselves onto construction projects whereby these things happens and it becomes afterthoughts. If we start thinking about it at this very early stage, then our construction will be environmentally and health and safety accredited. Will construction vehicles have enough shoulder space to be able to stop on the road? What if worker attempts to manually pick up a drain? And we all know there's a lot of manual work that happens on our site. This is telling us that the choices and the specifications that we are doing, we need to look at the weight, we need to think about where they are going to hold and how the design is going to look. And so, I mean, from what I'm talking, it appears as if I'm asking so much from designers, but this is the right design. This is the good design, because designing for safety is no different from good design. We assess the risk, and we can assess the risk against the probability of it happening and its severity. I mean, all these modules that I'm talking about has its own specific, let's say, courses that eventually we can go through when the time is there. And then you apply the hierarchy of control. What this concept says is that at any point in time, if you can't design it out, so the first point is every single hazard that you see, try and design it. Use your initiative and your innovation to kill out the hazard. Don't let it happen with your design. Design it out. If it is not possible, use something else. Find a substitute design. Think outside the box. Look at something else. If it is not possible, then you look at engineering controls. How do you isolate the risk, or you put in garden measures? There's also administrative controls where training and work scheduling can help. The last bit is PPE, the personal protective equipment of high-vis jacket, helmet, safety boots. And so over time, when somebody just provides his staff with PPEs, everybody thinks that's health and safety. No, it is the last bit that has to complement the four others that we've talked about. And so if you are thinking about PPE from the early stages, it means you are not doing the right thing. Try and design out the hazards before you give the person the PPE. So let's look at false protection, which is the greatest number of fatalities in the construction industry. And it accounts for the majority of people dying on site because of how construction is in terms of going high or going deep. And so whenever we talk of falls from height, people think it's only when the building is up, not necessarily. If you excavate, once the excavation is deep, you realize that anybody who is on top of what we'll call the ground floor is also working on height, and they can fall into the excavation. So it's something that you need to think about if you are working within those places. So in terms of falling from height, consider parapet. And you realize that if you consider these, and I think it's very much available, and it's something that we do, sometimes maybe people do without even knowing what the reasons were, but I know that definitely this is why we do that. It provides, not that it is just for people who, or it's not just adds up to the facade, but then when somebody has to go to the roof to maintain the activity, it can act as a protection for them not falling, because the wind patterns can sometimes affect people who work on high-rise buildings. And then it can, in the overall process, possibly reduce your cost. Another way of doing this is also specifying window sills at heights that can help you from, it can act as temporary guardrails. And so if your window sills are already built, you realize that when people are working along your construction site, they are safer because there are no open spaces, and it would avoid people falling. Skylights. If you are going to put in skylights into your designs, you need to think about how this is going to be maintained, because this can happen. If you look at the picture on my right, somebody can just fall through and they can die, or they could be permanently damaged. So why not consider things that can withstand human impact or loads that will be placed on those skylights? I talked about roof anchorages. Of course, these are the ones. Every single roof that people can eventually go there and work and maintain, because the air conditioning and services are placed there, we need to start looking at these type of designs, because you can then hook your safety harnesses and lanyards on it such that you will not be blown away, or you will not fall off the roof. It can also provide points for us to tie these things off. Obviously, this picture is foreign, but can we think of, if we are doing our roofs or we are designing our roofs, these bits, permanent anchors that can be incorporated at various areas so that we can avoid people falling because they've been able to hook themselves up to safety. This is also a very interesting detailing, such that you know that you can cast in sockets when you specify it around the floor openings, because you already know there's going to be a guardrail there anyway. If you can then put your scaffolding such that it enters the groove of these sockets, what that means is that the scaffolding that are placed around these points would be more stable than just lying flat on the floor or on the stairways, because you are going to use that particular detailing for your guardrails, for your rails anyway. It just adds up to your design such that it's more safer, and then you can then also use that particular holes for what you are going. So we are still just looking at how your detailing can also solve problems. The same way, floor openings, incorporating steel plates so that you can avoid things that can cause accidents. False through roof. If you know that materials are going to be stored on the roofs, you need to specify structures that can support the dead loads. And it is very, very important. And this is where I think structures come in. And so, I mean, that's also a whole topic within my architectural career, where structures was a no-go area. I could not understand it. But over time, we've come into grips with it, where we are dealing with structures. And so if you can design this as part of your design, knowing very well that when they need to go maintain this roof, they are going to keep certain materials and equipment on the roof, then it would help to avoid the roofs caving in. Same way, falls from roof. Let's put in place, knowing that somebody will go and maintain the facility. How do you help the person not falling off the roof? If you see these wires within, this is a steel construction. What he's saying is that if you're able to think about how you put in specifying holes in columns such that these safety wires, which are also metal, can be installed across the open spaces, then it will stop people from falling off the perimeter. Same way, we know that we need to go onto the roof to be able to maintain it. Let's specify fixed ladders so that we can avoid using movable ladders or portable ladders, which is also another bigger accident or hazard within the working spaces. So these fixed ladders are very much popular within the power plants and other high-risk environment, and it's no coincidence. It's so that we can avoid the picture on the right. Also, scaffolding. If you can consider eliminating the need for scaffolding by designing anchor spaces such that we would not need to put up scaffolding that will increase the risk, then that could also be same way, avoid confined spaces. If you know that your designs can avoid confined spaces or people going into deep spaces, then it is something that you need to look at to be able to design it out. Noise exposure. Find systems and stuff that can, if you are specifying equipment within your plant rooms and within your spaces, look at the options that could be more quieter, because other than that, then you put in the plant and then people have to wear ear protectors and all that, which is also added cost to the operations. So design such that that would be avoided, and it's the same way for vibration if your designs can help. Fumes. Specify hazards and chemicals that do not contain elements that can give cancer or other harmful sicknesses. So your choice of materials within the times that you are procuring is very, very important, because sometimes even when you need to repaint and you need to remove the old paint, because sometimes the hazards are not at the time of painting, or it's sometimes at the time where you need to remove it, where particles are generated, you need to look at the hazard sheets, the safety data sheets that comes with these chemicals. That will then help you to make the right choices in terms of what you specify for your designs and for your buildings. Excavations, think about how you can avoid them if they are the technology is there, because this is dangerous. Beams and columns, how do you fix them? If you already design detailing such that it will make life easier, think about it. Temporary ladders and platforms, bracings and clips that could help when we need to lift. And we are thinking about how we establish a life cycle culture, establishing enabling process, team with organizations who value the life cycle safety. So culture, process, and partners are very key. And it is very important of how the projects that we go on and the people that we want to associate with in terms of our professional practice. If somebody cannot understand what the life cycle of safety is, and they will not put in place these systems, and they are not thinking about the life cycle of the project, I would encourage that such person comes on board for us to be able to do this the way we want to do. Same way I spoke about it, you know, people are going to lift blocks. If it is structurally possible, why can't we specify lighter building materials or building elements? Why can't we do that? Because we know people are going to lift these blocks. If it is structurally possible, that's all I'm saying. Reasonably and practicability. We can design this out so that we can avoid manual handling and strain. Because the majority of our workers are constantly complaining of their bad backs, their neck injuries, and all that. How can we avoid people working in spaces like this instead of this? So the left hand, you can see the place is cramped, and on the other side, it is easier to work. Positioning of plants, I've talked about it. Quieter equipment. Somebody is working on the left and it's easier for him. The other guy on the right has to put in place systems because his plant and equipment is noisy. Specify resistant materials and resistant equipment such that when there's a fire, when there's an accident, it can resist it. All this is talking about this. I also want to touch on this new, what we've all been facing, and which is the COVID-19. And for me, as a safety person and somebody within the built environment, the COVID-19 has presented a challenge, and it's a challenge that I'm well embracing, because for the first time, and I'm saying this with much caution, for the first time, I'm very happy the way things are going in terms of the market woman is mentioning health and safety. Every single person has been very aware of our actions and inactions and what can happen, even though we know very well there are people who will not conform, whichever way. But this era has bring a lot of changes to how people think is normal. And so as interior designers and architects, there are new layouts and modeling that is going to change the way we design, because we need to design and minimize the spread of diseases. I'm saying this knowing very well that this is not going to be the only pandemic or the only virus that is going to hunt us. We should be aware that another one will come. I'm not a prophet of doom, but it will happen. And so our designs that has to stay there, test of time, whether we are alive or not, has to be able to minimize this spread. Knowing very well that people will be working from home very much, we need to start looking at how our households can accommodate working spaces. And so when somebody presents his idea to you, or when you are designing, you need to start looking at that area. That means that houses and homes should be able to accommodate more functions in the future. People are working long hours at home, meaning that access to ventilation and air quality needs to be taken into account. And these are all things that designers have to be thinking about. Rooms will need to have multiple functionalities in the future, because Even today, as I speak now, I had to run out from the office because of whatever is happening, come back home and do this presentation. And this is going to happen, and a lot of more people have seen this, such that if you did not plan, or if you don't have a plan for your space that could be used in this way, then you are going to struggle. We all know that people are going to be hesitant in terms of how they enjoy social life in the public. And so are we thinking of how we incorporate spaces within the working environment or within private homes such that people can still enjoy their social livelihoods in those spaces? Offices are going to get smaller because more and more people will be working from home. And when I was speaking to Ruth this afternoon, we talked about this webinar. I think we were trying to do this face to face, but this is presenting us with an opportunity where we are reaching more people and it is working. And so in future, we are all going to realize that we will do more Zooming, we'll do more Skyping, and we'll do more online stuff. And so we need to start looking at that in terms of our design and the elements that we put in place. There's also a need for us to be able to how the outside and the inside environment incorporate, because whether COVID goes or not, there is going to be that we are going to now have times where before you enter public spaces, you are going to be checked. And this is happening in the airports, and it's happening in spaces where they are taking health and safety seriously. And so that transition, that threshold, what and how are you going to design spaces and facilities for that? Classrooms, seating adaptability, restaurant seating adaptability, physical distance analysis. How are we going to make sure that whatever we design, even after the COVID, can still be adaptable when we get a situation whereby maybe 6 feet will not be enough? If we ever get a situation whereby we need to adapt our working environment into 10 feet, what are we going to do? Buffer signs and barrier treatment areas within our spaces, spatial versatility, which is very important. Are we going to be able to do that if we leave certain spaces or certain areas within our designs? It could be used for other things when the need arises. Let me leave you with this. As a professional in a business, the health and safety and the well-being of your employers and stakeholders must be central to everything you do. Your general principle, business principle, and values must be committed to providing healthy and safer environment for all. I believe that as an architect and as a business person, you can set yourself apart if you make health, safety, and well-being as an integral part of your solutions to your clients, to your customers, if you are able to encourage them to buy into what you are presenting, to buy into what you are selling, and to buy into what you are designing and the drawings that you are doing. Thank you very much, and I am very happy that this was able to happen. Of course, so my organization is Model Health and Safety. We've been a consultancy in Ghana since 2011. I've supported various industries, and I'm construction biased based on my architectural background. So one of the things that I've been trying to do recently is that I am hoping to be able to review a lot of designs from architects and designers such that safety could be something that we can incorporate. And so these are my details. Whenever you need me, you can always call on me. Thank you very much. Ruth, you can take it from there.
Thank you so much, Simon. I think it's been a wonderfully educative session. I've certainly enjoyed it. It's been riveting. Thank you for taking the time to put the presentation together. And I'm sure most of our participants watching enjoyed it just as much as I did. Indeed, the construction, sector that we're all a part of, we all know, we are probably the third largest part of the economy, we contribute significantly to the GDP, and some of these aspects of health and safety have to be taken very seriously. We'll go through some of the questions that participants have very quickly, if there are any. And if we don't have any questions so far, I'd encourage our participants to contribute, to the discussion. But Simon, it was interesting, that you mentioned, and I think a lot of this can also be aided, this conversation. You mentioned you and I discussing today some aspects of even work by mobile means, and virtual platforms providing us amazing opportunities for it. But there's also the very real, the reality that our construction industry is occupied currently by high-rise constructions. And even within COVID, or probably especially because of COVID, some of these aspects are going to become even a bigger reality, a bigger part of our reality. We're taking advantage right now of the lull that we have with the lowering of the restrictions. And you can see a lot of construction sites just actively just trying to engage, its workers, and so on and so forth. I want to start a discussion about that, and whilst we wait for some of the questions from participants to come in, and use probably a live example, being what we just recently completed, the Ghana Infectious Disease Center, which for me, whilst I listen to you, has a lot of take back from how, that particular construction was executed. And given all the kind of risks that you can have on a project such as that, the biohazard risks, the fiscal risks, the risk of crashing programs due to a very short time frame, and how to control all of these things within that kind of dynamic, which was very difficult. So beyond what you've just said, and I'm sure it's a part of your presentation as well, what is the duty of care that architects and project managers owe to the construction industry, such that even within the conditions duty of care do you believe that we owe the process of project management, from that point of view? Are we to ensure and demand and insist on health and safety inspectors, officers, professionals within each part of, like you just identified, the life cycle of the project? Is it about ensuring that your contractors, subcontractors all have their health and safety protocols, well aligned? Are you, as the architect, supposed to be part of those learning programs? How involved must the architect be in ensuring that some of these things are adhered to?
So I will start it off by asking myself a question, and possibly a question that all of us would ask themselves is, who is the owner of the project? Who owns the project? And so in any project, from where I started practicing safety, the owner is the client. And so there is a regulation which is called the Construction Design and Management Regulation that places the duty on the client to make sure that they employ competent people on their project. And so bringing it back to Ghana, I will say that we know very well how our interaction with our clients and how the built environment is. There are still clients in Ghana, which I've worked with some, who will insist that that gets done. And so from the RFPs up to the delivery of the project, they will make sure that safety is incorporated. And so before we even talk about pricing, they are going to be asking you, what are your health and safety procedures? What are the policies? And I've been in situations whereby I know very well that people just go online and they download documents and they send it. That is also something that is happening. And so people are only trying to tick boxes. I would just go a little bit further and say that, and I mentioned it, architecture for me, or architects for me, it's more integrity, values, and ethics than making the money. And so I can't compromise. It is not something that I cannot be part of a project. And I'm saying this very, very happily, that I cannot be part of a project that will kill people. And so knowing that very much, the duty of care is with the responsible person who is the person giving out the job. However, seeing, and I saw the last, I wasn't part of the webinar, but I saw the last CBD that you guys did, and it was talking about architecture as a business. If you see your practice as a business, health and safety would be part, same way as you see your accounting system or the way you see your other management systems. And so the first point is, let's see our practice incorporating health and safety, the way we treat our workers, the way we treat our designers, the way we treat our gardeners, people who even clean our workspaces. If we can start that, that is how we change culture. If you can't understand safety from that point, you can't design out safety. And so it is a culture shift, seeing how safety has to be done, but obviously training is very key. And as part of my chasing up, trying to push this across, I've gone through the process of going to the Department of Architecture, trying to push this agenda that is where we need to start. Of course, CPD is good, but we've all gone through a process whereby these things could have been incorporated in our training, and then it would have been part of us anyway. So nothing stops us from including certain modules within our subjects areas in the architecture school, whereby safety will be talked through, so that once somebody is thinking about safety at that time where they don't even understand what perspective is, then we can then talk about health and safety and environment. Of course, every single discipline within the construction process has to think about safety, procurement, quantity surveying, the project manager, but there's always someone at the construction site who is in charge. And that person is the person whose responsibility is very big. But then when we go back, the CEO or the person who is paying is the one who will stand in the court when there's a problem. And so health and safety is one of the things that has to start from top to the bottom. Because if the person is not ready to pay, if the person is not ready to encourage, if the person is not ready to empower, then we would have a problem.
Fantastic, fantastic. And I'll take one of the questions right now from architect Ransford and Prichun. How can you project the business advantage, Simon, of health and safety in construction and site operations on sites to enable clients to buy into the idea and be willing to invest in health and safety?
So that has always been the challenge as to the data and what we have. And this is what we've been trying to do as safety professionals, such that how do you compare a project that incorporated health and safety to that did not? And if you look at the rationale behind what I talked about, in terms of it being morally right, it being a compliance issue, the economics is clear. And so in a work environment or a site, if your best electrician gets injured, you're going to have a problem. If the architect breaks a leg and they're going to be out for 2 weeks, you're going to have a problem. If the site caves in, and I am sitting in a house where the building that is being built opposite me, the client or the owner of the property has been pushing this property to go on, and with last 3 weeks, the swimming pool, whatever, nobody knows what building is. It's actually caved in, the roof is caved in. So my question is, why you as a client, you can't see that it is a life cycle. You pay now, you enjoy later. And we need to be able to make that business case to them, for them to understand that it's the same way as buying the best shirt from Marks and Spencer or John Lewis rather than Primark. It is the same way of getting the best tailor to sew your suit or whatever for you, rather than picking up from somewhere else. We have to bring it home for them to understand that you are not just wanting to take money or wanting to give your money to a safety consultant because it's your friend, but because in the long run, it will benefit them. Some of the buildings that people are living in were built way before pre-colonial times, but we are still living in. There is a reason. It is not a coincidence. And so we need to be able to bring it home, make it more practical. But in terms of projection, of course, it is not something that we even have to argue. If you put in the best, you put in quality, you put in what needs to be put in at this particular time, eventually you enjoy, because productivity will be high, you get the best design. And I said it, safety in design means it's good design. If you can design out accidents, you can design out maintenance costs, which is also something very important. If your claddings will not have to be maintained so regularly, it means you are going to save costs within the life cycle of the project. If the paint that you are using is not going to be a paint that will fade within 2-3 weeks, then it means you are going to save money. And so when we talk about safety in design, it's not just about trying to say nobody is going to get injured. It is more sustainable and life cycle idea that we are trying to push.
Okay, fantastic. And I think I'll just add to that to say, we're actually looking at this in two parts, aren't we? Because there's the advice you owe the client, you know, to say to him that, listen, you need your health and safety professional on this project. It is irrefutable. And there's also the third eye you need to keep on your contractor. So as to not get them to, you know, cut corners with providing whatever personal protective equipment that is needed, that is specific and related to the job at hand. And very many times, and I'll give the example of this project again, the Infectious Disease Center, where you had people working on equipment, you know, oxygen equipment, so on and so forth, where you have quite a bit of welding on site and so on and so forth. And you have these guys working with their hands and telling you that, oh, you know, we're more capable of doing this way than wearing it. The gloves actually interfere with our work.
Absolutely.
You know? Yes, and you need to be firm as the consultant in this. And the thing that we don't realize is that the job satisfaction has very many things that are affected by the way it is that health and safety, you know, is handled. And staff turnovers are the things that you want to be able to avoid, you know, in construction. If you have to run shifts to avoid repeated work, you know, so people don't get fatigued, illness, all of those things. It makes a very strong case for the, you know, profitability of a business. So thank you, Simon. We'll take another question from architect Benjamin Afagbeji. He wants to inquire if your services include the formulation of disaster risk management plans for facilities. I hope that's clear.
Yes, so as part of health, safety, environment, and security that I've been involved, yes, I have been involved in preparing these type of plans for oil industries and industries that are high risk. So yes, we do from environmental management plans, environmental management systems to disaster management. The interesting thing is that what we are getting more nowadays is people who are going in for tenders. And it's something that is really helping out, because if you are going on for tender now, organizations are demanding and are asking for these sort of plans. And as I just said, it is so easy for you to, I had a situation whereby it was a media project. The guys called me, they asked, Simon, can you send us our CV? I said, what? He said, yeah, your CV, we go do some contract. I said, okay, that's cool. I will charge you, but I know where this is going to end up. It's not just going to be the CV because it's a media project. And then they called me back. They say, yeah, the guys are asking. I say, of course, the only thing you can do is put me on the project. And so, yes, we do a lot of things. And over the time, our contact is there. Benji, you know me, you can call me and we can sort it out.
And like Simon said, his contacts are a part of his presentation, which we will share with the entire membership who have participated in this CPD. So you can look forward to that. Architect Lawrence Opare, you see, asked for you to kindly elaborate the term near miss that I think you used within your presentation and its effects in the practice. Okay. Hello.
Hi, I was getting bad internet, so you can repeat that, please.
Oh, okay, so let me just repeat the question. from architect Lawrence Opariesi, kindly elaborates the term, the construction term near miss, and its effects in the practice.
Okay, so near miss is actually not a construction term; it's a safety term, and so there is the hazard, there is the accident, and there is the incident and the near miss. So near misses are very, very important in terms of how you manage safety. Before one accident would happen, from what we know, there would have been about 3-4 near misses. And so if I am allowed to put it in tree, the near miss is the one that you say, "Ekakakrebi." And so in construction, somebody slipped. That is a near miss. They didn't get injured. There was nothing happening to him. You can see that maybe a foundation nearly caved in, or there are signs that it's going to cave in. That is a near miss. Any single hazard that nearly turned out to be a fatality or an accident that had bad impact is considered as a near miss. And so when your guys are fixing or they are installing whatever element within your construction site, whether it is steel trusses or building blocks or whatever, if it drops and it doesn't hit anybody, that is a near miss. And what that happens, or how good that is if we can identify and report these near misses, and that's one aspect that possibly I didn't talk about it. We need to report accidents and incidents and near misses at every single point in our construction process. People think that when you report, it means that you are reporting. That is the report that we know in Ghana. But reports are good. If we report a near miss, the safety guy or the person responsible can then investigate so that it doesn't become an accident. And so yes, near misses are very important to be identified, reported, and then we can then review, put systems in place so that it doesn't end up becoming a fatal or a very serious accident.
Thank you, Simon. There's a next question here from past President's architect, Adote Brown. This is a big one for you, Simon. Can we consider cooling using natural ventilation, as is done in some parts of Australia, to reduce the COVID-19 risks presented by fully air-conditioned spaces? I think this is in relation to environmental safety. Yes, so I hope that question was clear.
For anything that has to do with nature and environment, ideally, we would want to be able to actually sleep outside if it's possible. And so obviously, yes, it presents a whole different type of design and innovation that designers has to come up with. And this also fits in with the green agenda, environmental sustainability, and the life cycle of whatever we are trying to do. And with this COVID-19 and its impact, of course, what's going to happen, and I hope that would happen in our country, is that people are now start thinking about new ways and innovative ways, whereby when there is a pandemic that could be airborne, or any pandemic that would be associated with the air or the environment or something element within the environment space, we can use the same environment to be able to protect ourselves. And so yes, the onus is on us as designers. How do we design it? Could it be practical? I mean, every single thing that we talk about safety, there's a buzzword here, reasonably practical. And so if it is reasonable, if it is practical, it means that we've looked at the cost, because there's something that we are very much aware. If you are going to put in a safety measure such that the cost cannot be affordable, it is stupid, excuse my words. And so we are not saying that everything that you have to do has to be something that can stop health and safety. No way. It has to be reasonable and has to be practical. And so yes, when it comes to design, and this is something that I said earlier, design reviews, and it's very, I know that we do review, but possibly maybe we don't do it with safety and the environment in mind. If we start looking at that, if whenever we put our designs on the board and we are reviewing the cost, we are reviewing the structures, we are reviewing all the others, if safety and environment is part of it, this will come up. Why we are choosing this particular, let's say, why are we choosing air conditioning? Why are we choosing this equipment? Why are we using this electrical panel? Why are we using it? Because if it affects safety and the environment, somebody will mention it and we will find alternatives.
Fantastic, fantastic answer. And we're talking about the area of COVID and all of that, and the fact that hygiene has to become standard even within our site organization, right from the get-go. When your contractor presents you what it is he wants to do with his site, it has to be with that in mind as well. I mean, Simon, you would be amazed at the kind of constructions that are ongoing right now, where people have no adherence whatsoever to any of the hygiene protocols as prescribed. And you need, this is the case I think you're making, that you need the health and safety expert. You need the oversight of that professional involved within the design and construction to make sure that these are adhered to. And
Ruth, I'm not going to cut you. Let me just bump in. If we look at the cases that we had in some of the companies and organizations in Ghana, I keep saying that we have platforms on safety where we discuss. All the organizations that already had safety officers and safety systems and management systems had no or very little, because it is something that they do. And so for me, I feel that COVID is going to present a very good advantage or opportunity for businesses and architects included to now look at even how is it necessary to collect hard copies? Is it necessary to exchange certain elements that can transmit diseases or viruses? I mean, a very simple thing that I'm expecting that gets eliminated from reception spaces is that, are we still going to continue putting the newspaper and the magazines over there such that everybody can touch and read and leave it for the next person to do that? Are we going to keep the same pen in the banking hall for all of us to use? These are the things that architects and designers need to be thinking about and inform our clients so that they think otherwise.
So we are looking at the add-on of technologies as enhancing health and safety within our construction. That's fantastic. Architect Kweku Bua Inchi also asks, which regulatory body in Ghana enforces these HSC regulations, and why do we believe these HSC measures are not adhered to by the letter of the law?
That's where you break me, because it is something that enforcement and regulations, it's very key when you talk about health and safety. Unfortunately, Ghana do not have a comprehensive health and safety law. And as I spoke earlier, since 2012, there is a draft policy that sits in cabinet, and every single change of government, it goes back to where it started from. As we speak now, the Department of Factories Inspectorate under the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations is the one responsible for an aspect of health and safety. And so you have the guys in the labor department who have, so there's a clause in the labor law. There are scattered and isolated clauses somewhere, everywhere that talks about something. In terms of the environment, the EPA is very strong. And we know why they are strong, because they have been an authority for a very long time. What safety professionals are asking is that make safety an authority. Give them a body that can bite. Give them a body that can go into a construction site and close it down. That is what we are looking at. And so,
sorry, which is the draft you referred to at the beginning of your presentation?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so it is something that is available. It is something that we feel that if the powers are given to us, it will be easier, and it will make architects and consultants and designers your life easier, because you would then have something backing you whereby the client cannot refuse. It has to be part of your business. By law, every single business should employ somebody responsible for health and safety. It is standard. And so that is the area that we are trying to look at. But whether it is new or whether it's something that we are pushing, some of us have dedicated our time that this is what we are going to do, and hopefully you can support us to achieve that.
Exactly. Architect Donald asks here, he says he saw a site contractor's site report with reference to frequency rates, TAFR. He asks if you can explain that. And there are some follow-up questions here on what lagging indicator means and lead indicator.
Okay, so if you say frequency rate, I don't know if there was a slide that I talked about the probability and then the severity. And so if you are calculating the accident and incident, which sits at a key performance indicator, you realize that what we are looking at is we want to have low accidents and low incidents on our site. However, there are times whereby a certain specific incident will be happening every now and then. And so that becomes the rates that a particular incident or a particular accident is happening. Because one of the things is that if you are seeing a surge, or if you are seeing a particular incident happening all the time, if there is a slip happening in a particular space, what that is telling you is that possibly the construction method or the material that was used, the cleaning process that is happening in that particular space, there is a problem. And that means that you can then go back to see what you need to do on that space so you can avoid that area.
Very quickly, we have just about 4 more minutes to wrap up. Architect Ransford Ampritrum is asking about injuries on site as an LTI in construction, LTI being lost time injury, not so. He's asking if you can speak on that.
Okay, so whenever there's an injury on site, I spoke earlier, somebody would be off. And if that person is off, it means that we are losing time. And so as part of the performance indicators on construction site, we always set a 0 lost time indicator. We don't want to lose time because somebody is injured. And if you go through the process of identifying the hazard and putting measures in place, you can avoid that. And so I always say that if you know if you can measure, if you know your effect and results, then you can put in place the process to get there. And so if you set your standards in the construction sites high such that you are not expecting this incident, you don't want this to happen to you on site, then it means that resources, manpower, competency, training, and all those elements would be put in at the early stages so that you do not get anything that would affect the project. Because one of the biggest thing about projects is that, and possibly maybe it doesn't happen, but it doesn't happen in Ghana, when there is an accident and it's a fatality, the project can stall, or the project can actually, they can close the project. And so if you can see that as something that can help stop your work, then it means that you do everything possible to avoid that.
We'll squeeze this question in quickly before we close, Simon. Architect Eric Arthur asks, are there liabilities to architects who use their professional stamps on designs they did not supervise the post-contract phase in situations of accidents?
Yes, and I mentioned it earlier that for me, when I see a building, I assume an architect is involved because that should be how it should be. Maybe I'm wrong. And so, and I said it earlier that people are not pursuing compensation, and they are not going to court often because we know our judicial system and how frustrating that is, whether it is a good or bad. But that is an area that we have to be very careful. It's the same way, that's the reasons why we take the professional indemnity insurances and all that stuff, because whatever we are doing can have repercussions. And so I mean, it's a non-starter, it's not rocket science. If you put your signature there, you are telling the whole world that you are the guy who supervised it. I will leave it there.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And Simon, thank you so much. We hope that you can be a part of the Institute to help us, build some of these modules and present some of these cases a lot better. I think a lot of the attendees are encouraged by your presentation and want us to push for that to happen. Letitia Addison, comments the fantastic presentation that we just had, and I think so many of the others who listened have the same kind of commentary. Thank you very much. Thank you for those who participated. We will be happy to take further questions, which you can route through the GIA administrator, and they can be directed to Simon, and he can answer and respond to those, after this session. Simon, thank you again for being.
It's been my pleasure, and I'm always there for the GIA. Thank you.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you so much for participating in this CPD, everyone, and we'll see you later.